Okay, welcome everybody to today's meeting. The um, the topic, as you all know, is on renewable energy adventures, solar and small hydro stories that bind Canada and Sri Lanka. Our speaker, we're very lucky today to have Lalith Gunaratne, who's been a member of CACOR now since 2012. And as you all can read, he is not only an entrepreneur, but a parent. But he also runs a mindfulness-based leadership consultant, which I find very interesting. I think we could all use some of that. And an ethical business developer. He's an engineering technologist and has a master's in responsibility and business practice, which again, very interesting. But today he's going to highlight for us a lifetime of renewable energy adventures in solar, small hydro, in Canadian-Sri Lankan collaboration, which he'll tell us all about. I'm really looking forward to hearing this presentation today. And from here on in, I'll hand it over to you, Lalith.
Thank you very much, Richard.
One other thing I should mention to people, if you want to ask a question, you put it in the chat, you put a Q in front of it. And if it's just if you're just chatting, that's fine. But if it's a question, you put Q, and then I take the questions in order. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Lily.
Thank you very much, Richard. And it's such a privilege to present to the CACOR community and the guests here. So I'm just going to jump right into it, given that I have a long story to tell, and then I have to say it all in about 45 minutes. And that story started in 1980 when I signed up for a mechanical engineering technologies diploma at Seneca College, which was done in partnership with Ontario Hydro. So I was being trained to be a nuclear plant operator. So I spent a bit of time at the Pickering plant, and I realized that that job, I'm a people person, that sitting in front of a bunch of dials like Bart Simpson does, or Homer Simpson, I think. Yes, and waiting for something to go wrong is not my kind of thing, I thought. So what we did was my cousin and I decided that we are going to have an adventure, and that's how the story began. So this story also weaves in Canada-Sri Lanka collaborations, and none of this was planned. All these things kind of fell into place, happened because the two of us were out there on an adventure and open to ideas and open to different ways of doing things. And the universe kind of opened up and brought these opportunities to us. And we ended up starting a business. And in that business, I was very lucky at the fact that we were doing a business that was ethical, that was to do with renewable energy that could contribute to this Earth's well-being. So all of those things were so the benefits that I had in forging ahead with this business. So the presentation I'm going to make is going to be in three parts. So the first one starts with Canada, and then ending up in Sri Lanka with a solar business. Then I'm going to double back and do a little bit of a presentation on a non-profit. So the first section is going to be on the profit-making business. Then we were involved in a non-profit organization. I'll do a little bit of a session on that. And then the third section is going to focus on small hydro and Canada, essentially Canada. And then I'm going to be open to questions after that. So the business itself, let me go ahead with the slides and then get the ball rolling. So this is the Pickering plant in the Ontario Hydro's Pickering plant in Toronto, in the outskirts of Toronto, and deciding that we were going to do something different. So I love this Robert Frost poem. So my cousin, his name is Varian Pereira, he graduated from U of T about the same time, in 1983. So we thought we're going to see the world before we start our serious life. And our parents immigrated here from Sri Lanka for both of us. So they committed to bring us here to give us a new life. So that's how it started. And these opportunities then came from the move into Canada and Sri Lanka in the 1970s. So After graduating, the normal thing would have been to get a job, but this is what we did. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So that has been the path of both of our lives for the last, I would say, over 40 years. And it has been an interesting journey as an entrepreneur, as a person who's self-employed, who has lost a lot, who's learned a lot from all of those losses and failures, and then won a few. And this particular business, which was the beginning of our life, which I consider my real education for almost 14 years, gave me the real grounding of who I am, I believe, from the work that we did there. So what happened was, then we decided that we wanted to see the world. So we were inspired by James Michener's book called The Drifters, about a bunch of young people who bought a Volkswagen Caravan in London in the 1960s. And we thought we'll do the same. So we went across to London and found a Volkswagen pop top and followed the path of the book, and ran with the bulls in Pamplona and through Spain and Portugal and along the Mediterranean. Our plan was to get across to Asia and then end up in Australia, because we had work visas for Australia. But the Iran-Iraq war had started, and we had to stop halfway and then go north and then go back to London, sold the van, and we thought we'll stop by Sri Lanka on our way to Australia. In Sri Lanka, things changed. Another cousin came up with an idea of a solar-powered water pump. We thought, that's an interesting thing. Why don't we check that out? So this is what it resulted in. So it was a sketch on a piece of paper, and then we had an old friend from our previous trips to Sri Lanka. He is Sir Arthur C. Clarke. He's a science fiction writer who happened to live in Sri Lanka. You may know him from 2001 Space Odyssey, the Stanley Kubrick movie, and 2010 Space Odyssey. He's the one who predicted all the technologies that we're using right now. So we went to him with this sketch, and he introduced us to two wonderful human beings. One was an inventor of the two-wheel tractor. His name was Ray Vijayawardene, and another one owned a lab manufacturing company. He was a former teacher. So he had a real interest in renewable energy as well as solar. So he had imported a few CACOR solar modules, and he was making lab equipment for schools. So he made little solar cell items which could power a small motor to be used as an experiment in these labs. So he took us under his wings and taught us everything we need to know about solar and IV curves, and gave us a little part of his factory for us to come up with this contraption. So it's a mobile solar powered water pump. So while we were just having a good time, we spent about 3-4 hours every day tinkering away at this. And then we ran out of money at the end of all this in '85. And our parents said, look, guys, stop partying and stop messing around, come back to Canada and get a job. And the week before we left, this newspaper article changed our life. It created such a lot of interest that we couldn't believe it. So we had run out of money. So we had to come back to Canada. We came back to Canada and got our jobs for about 6 to 8 months, collected enough money to go back, because we decided to make 6 prototypes of the water pump. In the meantime, in Scarborough, I was putting gas in my car while I was there in '85. A friend of mine who had got into Ontario Hydro came by and said, hey, how are you doing? What are you up to? And I just told him that we were up onto this solar energy business. He said they have created a new business ventures division in Ontario Hydro who are promoting advanced new technologies, Ontario-based technologies. And then they introduced us to a company called TPK Solar, which is on Bentley Road in Ottawa, in Nepean. And this is now 1985. And then they bought us 2 train tickets to come up to Ottawa in 1985. And we met this company, TPK Solar, who Gabriela has a connection with them because she has helped them with government funds to do some pilot projects too. It was run by a professor, Ray Thomas from Carleton. And they essentially convinced us that we should actually buy a solar manufacturing system, citing the fact that the silica sand in Sri Lanka is so high grade that we are selling it to Japan and Taiwan to make computer chips, that this is the same technology. So they helped us to create this grand vision of creating a big solar energy business in Sri Lanka. So armed with this information, and then they also introduced us to a company called Galt Energy Systems in Cambridge. They gave us a bus ticket to go to Cambridge. We met that company too, and I'll talk about that company in a little while towards the end of that too. So armed with this information, we went back to Sri Lanka. And one thing led to another, and we ended up, USAID had a program for new business ventures, innovative companies, to do a market and a feasibility study. Now, we went back there with a little bit of money, but not much, wondering what to do. And as I said, when the intentions are good, the universe opens up. And the USAID program partnered with Coopers and Lybrand to do market studies and feasibilities. So we partnered with the Coopers and Lybrand folk from Washington, D.C. and the local team. We got involved in the surveys and all of that, and putting the vision out there. We went to rural areas of Sri Lanka. And when we first took the water pump, most people said, look, this water pump is neither here nor there. We have large fields that we need to irrigate. This pump may just be okay for the garden. We need lighting for our homes. So one of the things that we found out was about 80% of Sri Lanka's rural homes didn't have electricity. And about 75 to 80% of Sri Lanka's population lived in rural areas, and most were farmers. They were scattered around the country. So the utility didn't have the ability to spread the grid to those areas because the return on that investment will not be also enough to justify that investment. So, but one of the things that we realized was that there were rural farmers who could possibly afford a system like this. And they had a desire to buy a system like this because they were using kerosene lamps right now. A mother would bring a child to you and to me and say, blow your nose, and there'd be black soot coming out of their noses, because education is such an important part of the Sri Lankan culture that these kids studied over a kerosene lamp. And the mother woman would say, my walls are getting black. So all of those things. And we also saw that there's a higher income bracket of people in the rural areas who own 2 to 5 acres of land who could actually afford a system like this. And their whole quality of life will improve. So that's the premise that we used in going with Coopers and Lybrand into rural areas. And we got enough of information to support a project to be established in Sri Lanka. So this feasibility study gave us the ammunition to go to the local development banks and raise the funds there. So we raised about, I think it was about 10 million rupees at the time, would have been about $250,000 here. Now, as 27-year-olds, we were really tenacious. We didn't take no for an answer. We pushed them, many arguments with them, put the bankers into a bus one time and took them all to the rural areas because they haven't gone off the beaten path. And then that's how we convinced them that they should finance this business. So they came up with an equity investment and a loan investment, which then enabled us to import the equipment and start the factory in Sri Lanka. So these are the three partners. One is my cousin in the middle, and the other, his name is Pradeep Jayawardena. And so we set up the factory, and in the middle there is Dr. Sud Varma, who is based in Ottawa, who came from Nepean. He was a chief technology officer at TPK to help us to set up the factory. So that's me on the left making the first solar panel, which is sitting here in the background, right behind me here. So one of the greatest things that happened to us, because we were green with business, the fact that 2 development banks came on board helped us to sort out a few things. Now, if you look at ESG, environment, sustainability, and governance, environment, we were actually now contributing to the environment by avoiding costs of, say, coal power generation and all of that too. And just to double back a moment, like Canada, one of the commonalities between Sri Lanka and Canada were they were both, most of their energy was generated through hydropower. Sri Lanka had a hydraulic civilization from about 1100, where they had diverted rivers and created irrigation systems that made it the breadbasket of the East. And Canada, as we all know, by the name alone, I realized Ontario Hydro, Quebec Hydro, we were hydro-based. But in the 1980s, as Sri Lanka was developing, that 70% of the hydro capacity that was providing electricity to the nation was not enough because our energy requirement growth was moving up by 10%. So we were moving away now, started to move away from the renewable base to now coal was one of the options that Sri Lanka was seriously looking at. So what we thought was we were going to avoid the need for large coal plants by electrifying rural areas with solar. So that's that's the vision that we had to cover that E part. And S part was partly also we were creating an option for rural people who didn't have any other way to get improve their quality of life. So we thought we'll be covering this part, and then we also covered this part by in our own factory in the way we led and managed the organization. And the governance part, that was the most interesting to me, and that was probably the most important lesson to me that has held me in good stead in business all my life. These bankers who we thought were a pain, who came into our board, gave us some strict guidelines on the governance side. We had to hire a permanent accountant. We have to have monthly accounts by the 10th of the next month. We had to audit our accounts annually by an independent auditor. And also the other part was the shareholders agreement, which took hours on end to sort out, and which I thought, because I don't get into that detail, I'm a people person, but that shareholder agreement was also a very robust shareholder agreement. So two things that was impressed upon me was hire a good accountant, a finance person, and then a company secretary to manage the processes, the board processes. So if we made a decision at the board level, we had to sign a board resolution and have it in the board resolution book within 24 hours. And so those are the strict rules of governance that has held us in good stead, which also helped us at the end of this business when we were running out of money. So that's one thing. And then inside the factory too, most of the employees that we had, we were able to hire from a local vocational school for disabled people. So 90% of our factory employees had various disabilities. So that was an incredible opportunity for us also. And then Sir Arthur C. Clarke being there gave us a lot of legitimacy by promoting us, and because there were so many people who were detractors too. If this was such a great idea, why didn't somebody else do it? That kind of attitude. And of course, our age went against us. So Arthur Clarke gave us a lot of legitimacy by giving us that confidence to move forward, and also independently supported what we were doing. So Arthur Clarke also gave us this Sinclair C5. It was the first electric car that was made by Clive Sinclair, the computer entrepreneur in England. So he had imported 2 of them, and he gave us one of these. And we put solar panels on top, and that was our runabout. And when we got married, my wife and I went away in that Suntec car, to the great amusement of a lot of people. But this car also, so one of the biggest challenges we had was to convince people that this plate would generate electricity. So we need every gimmick that we had to prove to people that this technology was an effective technology. Because you got to remember, this is 1984. Nobody had really heard of solar photovoltaics at that time. Even globally, it was a specialized application for satellites and remote applications for various very remote places for telecom and refrigeration and things like that. So we made 3 different sizes of modules: an 18 to 20 watt module, 36 and a 50 watt module, and we packaged it well. We wanted to create a consumer item of this by using dealers. So one of the things that happened also was that we innovated within the factory. So our leadership style was one where we allowed people to participate in the process, to give us a lot of feedback, to have a constant dialogue going between ourselves as leaders of the business. We were 3 joint managing directors, and the team that was there. So we got out of their way. All we did was let the company, inspired them to do the best that they can. We provided everything that we could in terms of resources, and we also did I especially did a lot of the PR stuff, because we had to do that because there were so many detractors along the way too who didn't like what we were doing. So then BP Solar recognized us and then gave us a contract to manufacture their modules, because they accepted the level of quality that we were producing these modules at. And then I was also invited to the United States, in Maryland, in Frederick, Maryland. There was a factory, a solar breeder, which is full of solar panels on the roof, which is making solar panels. So we formed an alliance with SolarX, who would sell us the solar cells and the balance of equipment for us to manufacture these modules, because we were still not able to manufacture the solar cells in Sri Lanka, because it was going to be in different stages. So that alliance helped us a lot, because we had a steady supply of solar modules and good pricing and good terms that we could work with them and build that relationship. So we also created our factory to be a solar breeder by putting solar panels that were factory seconds on the roof, and increased our own power generation capacity on our own roofs. So which then also was a good good way of balancing our own energy needs too. So this is our typical rural areas. As I said, um, um, most of these people were yearning to get a quality of life. You drive into a village in the middle of the night, it was total darkness, and you see one house which had solar panels, it would light up the whole area. So the quality of life was a big thing. So what we did was we also focused a lot on marketing. How do we market this product? Because it was a new product, a new technology, but we looked at the 4 P's of marketing. The product itself, how do we make it into a product where we package it with a solar panel and all the wiring that's needed? Even a battery was sold, and we trained local youth, local dealers to go and install these systems. And so a consumer could buy this as a consumer item. And of course, the price had to be right too. So we had to then find ways of lowering the price, but at the same time, we also were able to convince a couple of the non-governmental organizations who were doing microfinancing to work with us. And of course, that was not an easy journey, because all it takes is a couple of systems to go wrong and then stopping paying the microfinance to get a bad name. So we went through those kinds of crises along the way. So microfinancing was a big help for us to build the business, and promotion. So because most of our clients were rural based, we had to use rural folklore, traditional music, to go to the villages and promote, because the sun is an important part of sort of the older pagan kind of beliefs of these rural people too. They worship the sun as a life giver. So we use that as a way, and using the local cultural practice to promote it, whereby the Suntech brand name became synonymous with the solar. And place, of course, we had to make this available at dealers very close to the markets that are out there in rural areas. So we found dealers out there in the regional towns, and then we trained rural youth, gave them motorcycles. They could go around the villages and promote and sell these and install these systems. So the other thing that we did was we had an attitude of a relentless focus on marketing. What are the benefits that the customer will get from this? And then how do we incentivize them to buy it? At the same time, if something went wrong, we had this zero tolerance policy. If anybody sent a postcard or called us, even if we lost all our profit, got in a van and went to this remote place to fix it. And we had a lot of systems going wrong in the initial stages by people not knowing how to use it. They're adding 12-volt televisions and other things because this is a finite closed loop system. So we had to really be on the road quite a bit to educate our client base too in using this system in a proper way. So this is a typical newspaper ad that we took out to promote this. And then we went around the villages. We had 3 vans like this, went to village markets to promote these systems. and that's how we built the market up. So I'm going to speed up the process now because I want to get to the other side too. So we use temples and churches and community centers to promote this. These are typical dealers and a typical house, and these are the kinds of lights that we manufactured in our own factory because they were not available in the market. So we had to import ecos and manufacture our own 12-volt lamps to be more efficient, because there were other lamps that would take more power than it should. And then we also got blindsided. There was a sudden smear campaign against us, basically saying that we are ripping off poor people in rural areas with this technology. These three guys have come from overseas, and so there was a whole range of stuff that was going on that we had to now start countering, because any bad thing that came up would get in the way because it was new. Finally, I had to actually search for one of these people who kept on writing this article and show up at his doorstep and say, I'm so and so, you're writing about us. Can I have a chat with you? And he reluctantly let me into the house and then stopped doing this, to see that this was supported by the UK and the Australia coal boards. Any of the, because there was a big opposition to the coal business too that was going to come in, coal plant, and anything that threatened these industries, they wanted to kill us, essentially kill the business. And this is how it started. So that really opened up my eyes to the fossil fuel industry's tactics in how they operate. And we were making an insignificant dent on the whole electricity requirement of the country, but we were fascinated at the fact that they paid attention to us. But we used our own tactics to do our own PR to nullify all of those smear campaigns. But it took a lot of work and effort. So we had also we brought rural people into this place. We used people like Sir Arthur Clarke and others to really do our PR about the intention of our business too. It was a decentralized business. Our vision was to create mini grids around the country where solar and other technologies could come together, and then eventually when the grid comes, it's not fully required to supply, because these mini grids will supply themselves. So we had this kind of a vision that we were promoting in the country. And this is a typical inside of a house. And we also were supported and recognized by international NGOs. This is Solar Electric Light Fund. Person called Neville Williams was a great source of support for us, wrote articles internationally about what we were doing. And we installed over 100 systems as a gift that he gave to an NGO in the country. So all of these things helped us, and we were slowly getting on the global map. And then we also collaborated with the other companies like Singer to do 12-volt vaccine fridges, for instance, and sending them out there to rural areas. So we were doing many other interesting projects, larger scale projects, for using solar diesel hybrids for very remote applications, solar water pumping. So all of those things are also starting to evolve. And then in the meantime, we were getting noticed internationally. And this is very interesting for me, because as I was going through my boxes in the archives of to work on this paper, this presentation, I found this. I had forgotten about this, that we were invited to this conference in Ottawa back in 1988. Perhaps some of you were there. And I noticed that one of our members, Jeff Passmore, did the welcome address from SESCI. So for me, it was fascinating. So we presented our model internationally, and we were getting noticed internationally. Apparently, we were finding out that we were the first in the world to sell rural home systems, solar home systems in a retail manner. So this other article became, we published this in Ontario Technologies. And again, I had lost track of this. This is 1988 Ontario Technologies. I'm a member of the OSET in Ontario. And this article is there. And then also Ontario Hydro's involvement, they kept track of us. And the Ontario Parliament invited me to make a presentation in 1988 to these ministers, Vince Kerrio, Monty Quinter, Alvin Curling, and Wong, Mr. Michael Wong, in the Ontario Parliament, about what we were doing. So what I'm saying also is here, we saw a great opportunity for Canada to be in the leading edge in a technology like solar photovoltaics. And TPK Solar installed the first ever system solar manufacturing facility in Yunnan in China, first ever solar manufacturing facility in India, and ours was the third. And I know, Gabriela, you were involved in many other programs in Romania and other places, Zimbabwe and places like that too. So we were getting international recognition for all this. And I was also given we were also given an award by Ontario OSET by Premier Jackman. I think this was back in 1991, if I'm not mistaken. And I was invited to publish papers. And I'm really surprised even now I'm getting emails from academia saying that they're looking at these papers from way back when. So all of that helped. And this is what happened at the end. 1999, Shell got into the solar business. They were getting into the business about 1998, and then they were setting up new companies. I knew that if they set up a company in Sri Lanka, they'll wipe us out because of their deep pockets. We then convinced them to buy our company because we had all the governance stuff sorted out. They were easily able to buy our company because we didn't have skeletons in the closet. So that really paid off for our discipline on the governance. So we were thrilled that Shell was entering the solar business, but we lost a lot of friends in the environmental area they thought that we were selling out. But I was really thinking that Sir Mark Moody Stewart, who was the chairman of Shell at the time, was serious about moving Shell away from fossil fuels. It was not to be. As soon as Mark Moody Stewart retired, they moved away from solar, but they also left a wake of problems behind. And that was really bad because many of these systems that were installed, so they shut our factory down. They were bringing now modules from Europe, and they were not properly, and I have seen some of those modules, they're delaminating and all that too. And the system started breaking down after they left, and the microfinancing broke down, so they left a bit of a mess behind. So Shell's former manager, Shell exited the solar industry on a global, seemingly without due consideration to how after-sales service and warranty replacements would be provided, and then damaged the industry, sadly damaged the industry, and took a long time for industry to recover in Sri Lanka. But now things are going well again. But of course, they'd come back and voice those empty kind of rebuttals. But the real issue was on the ground. So I ended up then doing a lot of consulting work in renewable energy and rural energy all over the world for the World Bank and various other agencies. And that's how I moved on. And then a lot of stories have been written about all this. But, I never really paid much attention to this history until really researching this for this presentation. And this book called Chasing the Sun has a chapter, and next edition called Solar Power has a chapter in it. So, and then we are also recognized now, and I realized in the International Solar Energy Society as a pioneer in the industry. So it's nice to get that recognition, but I moved away from it. And I came to Canada in 2011 and invested in a solar business where it was owned by Professor Ray Thomas and Dr. Sud Varma. They were going after the FIT program in 2011. However, when I moved in 2011, I was driving along Highway 7. I was seeing signs, skull and bone signs with solar panel pictures and wind power pictures. And I was wondering what's going on. And then unfortunately, that business got caught up in the political quagmire when Ontario Premier, Premier candidate Hudak threatened to kill the Green Energy Act. And the FIT program, I think, was ill-conceived. They gave too much of a high price for the grid-connected systems, which was one of the reasons why it wasn't successful. And the company that I joined had some of the best systems in place. Supan, they won a CANCIA award. This is in Inglewood, but it's such a pity that I lost money. And it really set me back financially too as I moved to Canada in 2011. But, we are fighters, we are entrepreneurs. So we set up a new company called Our Sun Canada to go after indigenous projects. But that was also a difficult proposition. It would cost, you have to have deep pockets to do business with indigenous communities. You got to travel there, you spend a lot of time creating relationships. So it just didn't go too well. But we then had an opportunity with a partner in Guyana to do some systems. We won some projects there, the President's House. And again, that whole project also program in Guyana came to a halt because of some poor relationships on the ground, and that then again made me come out of the renewable energy business. So I'm going to go back into a quick presentation on the non-profit side of the renewables. In 1991, we established an organization called the Energy Forum to bring all the renewable energy promoters together. Because I found that renewable energy promoters of, say, the wind or small hydro would be, again, criticizing each other, and it wasn't helping us. And ITDG was established in the 70s by E.F. Schumacher. Small is Beautiful. It's a British organization who actually really done incredible work in establishing micro hydro programs in places like Peru, Nepal, and also in Sri Lanka. So, so this was the micro hydro. So we have a rich culture of micro hydro in Sri Lanka, off-grid communities, village hydro, and over, as you can see, 6,000 households at that time in 2006 benefited. It has increased even more because the hill country areas have a lot of access to water. So from 10 kilowatts to 300 kilowatt systems have been installed. And the Energy Forum, which I was a co-founder of, and I held the post of convener and chairperson of the board, we did a lot of work with the rural micro hydro communities too, and brought them together, governance and all of that, and then got them ready to grid connect systems, some of their systems too, when they were appropriate. We looked at income generation activities and all that too. So we also, as the Energy Forum, played around with biogas and biomass technologies, and then also attracted the World Bank and worked closely with the World Bank to establish a program, 100+ million in the first tranche and another 100 million for the second tranche, where Sri Lanka became a leading nation for using renewable energy, now funded by the World Bank. But one of the things that was successful for the World Bank was the fact that people like us were able to work with the World Bank to tell them, look, don't foist outside technologies on us. Let's adapt the local technologies. So even a micro hydro system, they were promoting the BA standard, which is a very high standard that was not required. So we said, look, already there are systems there. Let's bring a standard that is affordable to the country. And even for the solar business, they were promoting importing solar batteries. We said, no, there's a good solar battery industry locally. So we sent our batteries to Sandia Labs in the States and got them approved, and started, because we had a battery manufacturing facility in country. So that's how we really work closely with an overall way with the outsiders to bring into Sri Lanka programs like this. We have now over I think close to 800 megawatts of mini hydro in Sri Lanka. There were over 120,000 solar home systems. So all of that was possible. And micro hydro and mini hydro, micro hydros transforming to mini hydros, and all that was possible as a result of us working closely with the international institutions too. So I'm now going to shift to Canada. And I spoke to you earlier about our being introduced to Galt Energy Systems in Cambridge, Ontario. A company was owned by an amazing engineer called Dave Montmorency. He had developed a low head, high powered turbine. Now this is a newer name for it, called green energy. So this turbine it's a high efficiency turbine with a lower head. So I took this material and went to Sri Lanka, and then an opportunity came up. And then we decided to put a bid for it and won that bid. So this is me being, sorry, excuse me. Let me just quick cough. And so in 1985, given a tour of the Bradford plant in a water purification plant, where I saw the system in operation, I was very impressed by it. So we took this information back to Sri Lanka and ended up developing a 300 kilowatt project in a tea plantation in 1987. And unfortunately, because of weather changes and all that, this system only works half the year right now because of drought conditions and all that too. But other than that, it's still operational from all that time because it's a simply designed system. So Galt Green Energy was renamed because, as typical as these companies are, they're run by experts and scientists and engineers. When they do not have the business savvy and the ability to really look at business in a pragmatic way, these businesses are very, very difficult to maintain, to sustain. So Dave Montmorency, an amazing engineer, was a perfectionist, and that may have been one of the issues why the business couldn't really take off globally. And then it was now renamed into Alpha Star. And I got involved with Alpha Star more recently because we were now trying to promote this technology. It's called low head siphon, even a better technology than the L turbine. This technology could work with a 7-meter drop, run of the river technology, which would prevent us from doing large civil works. So there are enough of canals that were built from the 1100s in Sri Lanka and lakes, and this is one of them in Sri Lanka, a site that we were planning to put a system like this with a drop that could easily absorb these systems. We had identified 16 solid sites already to work with. So we were working with Alpha Star to bring these two things together as we were moving forward. And typically as a company like this, companies like this, survival is at stake unless projects come online. So this whole tension was there, and unfortunately there was no other support for companies like this to carry on with this technology. So you see the large environmental footprint in the normal traditional technologies, and here's a small footprint with the Alpha Stars eco-siphon system. So the eco-siphon system has a whole bunch of positive attributes. Zero land acquisition, because you don't have to build 4 bay tanks and channels and all of that to divert the water and then drop it. Construction timelines are lowered, and all of those things created. This is a beautiful system that we could really do a lot with. However, we couldn't do much with it. But before that, there was a system that was installed in Haliburton, Ontario. It's called the Emerson system. It's a 40 kilowatt system, and I'm going to quickly show you how that process went and why. This is one of the reasons as to why it's so difficult to do these kinds of projects in Canada, because of all the requirements that are there. So this project, construction started in 2016 and it was commissioned in 2019. Now, this could have been completed in 1 year. So this is one of the biggest issues that faces Canada in developing these kinds of projects, because we have enough of water sources to develop a huge hydro using source using these technologies. So look at this. 1987 is when they started the pre-feasibility study. 2019, and all of these steps that they had to go through. Now, I took this out of the Emerson website, and I've been there many times. I know the people, and they were so patient with the whole process. The cost overruns are huge because of time delays and all these people that they had to hire to do all these checks and balances. All the way 2014, they're still doing all of this stuff. And then 2016, they finally got the declaration letter for them to start. But in the meantime, there were various other delays, and at the last moment, they were asked to do a salmon analysis. So all of that, then they were finally able to commission the project on 18th May 2019. So these are things that we need to think about, because see, from the water power website, you can see that we can do so much with our water power resources in Canada, as it is in Sri Lanka too. And then Sri Lanka has now taken it seriously and doing a lot of work to minimize these kinds of roadblocks that are along the way. And here is water power endorses ending new baseload gas-fired generation, they say, with clean energy. And they promote the fact that we have so many other sources that we can use to meet our needs. So First Nations power, I took this from Chris Henderson's book, Aboriginal Power, the most abundant renewable resource. We know so many areas in indigenous areas have so many opportunities there too. And then our solar company, we partnered with Pickmobert First Nations to do our solar projects back in 2011 for our FIT program. So we got intimately involved with them. Norm Gerling was heading the economic division. So Norm was basically telling me that, again, they had double whammy with the indigenous areas, because they had to get not only the standard approvals from the traditional approvals from the Canadian government and the Ontario government and the local authorities, land authorities, water authorities, but they had to also get similar approvals from the Indigenous Affairs Ministry, which doubled some of these time frames for them to do these projects. So these are things that we need to address. And then, of course, now ISO has come up with this program, but many people are skeptical about it because of all the approvals that are required. So the environmental assessment and permitting processes need to be streamlined and explicitly recognize the overarching importance of renewable energy projects. An objective should be to reduce the average time for project approval in half within 18 months is what they're saying, advocating. So we have a huge opportunity here for me in Sri Lanka as well as in Canada, to use renewables to deal with our carbon footprint as a nation. And this is what I think that we need to focus our attention on. So I would say thank you for your patient hearing, and I would welcome your questions now.
Thank you, Lalith. That was excellent. I really enjoyed that presentation. I wish I'd had you part of our, well, it's not over yet, but the collaboration that we're trying to make the Ottawa hospital expansion more green. I'll tell you more about that. We can talk about that afterwards.
Sure.
But my first question, I'll take the moderator's prerogative to ask the first question. The detractors, you talked about them where they were perhaps in Sri Lanka, but how do you overcome the detractors, say, in Ontario? Obviously, the fossil fuel industry and so forth. I mean, and natural gas and all of that. How do you overcome that sort of, all the deep pockets that they have and so forth?
Yes. Well, in a place like Sri Lanka, because it was a small place, we could identify individuals who were representing them and do our PR. So it was easy. But as you know, it's a combination of issues. Now, we had also members of parliament who didn't like us going and setting up and giving people the ability to have control of their energy resources, because as policies, governments want to have control over their people. So having them interconnected is one of the things which I realized later on in Sri Lanka, but that was an overarching policy. So there are ingrained policies like that which are very, very difficult to deal with. And then the other thing is the usual players, as you just mentioned, the big oil, the big energy companies, as well the utilities. The utilities don't like the small stuff. It's hard work for them to interconnect all this small stuff into their grid. And so even in Ontario with the feed-in tariff program, we found that pushback. We really definitely have that pushback in Sri Lanka with the Ceylon Electricity Board too. So there has to be a political will to push these things through. There has to be then incentives given to companies, even private organizations, because as you saw, the cost of doing these projects become double and treble as a result of having to deal with all of these issues, as well as the PR, the pushback that we have from various agencies. So if we are serious about bringing on renewable energies, then also we need to seriously look at the subsidies that have been given to the coal industry and the oil industry, and subsidies are still going for some of those out there. So there is a combination of things, and of course the PR that we need to do about the impact that renewable energy can have, because a lot of it is dismissed as small stuff. As you said, it is for lotus eaters. This is just because utilities also like to have large power plants, for obvious reasons too, because when there are fluctuations, they need to be able to power their way through to bring the level of energy to meet the loads. So but now there's electronic control systems, and there's much more technology available to handle those issues. So I think this is a good time to really promote the renewables again.
Perfect. Art, you're up, and Phil, then you're on deck.
I guess I do want to say what a fascinating trip you've had, Lalith. Just spellbinding. I really enjoyed your talk. Of course, I asked my question about if you were aware of the IESO and their small hydro program, and clearly you are. And I guess because I've certainly posted some material on it on our website over these past few months. Mary Hagan, who you know is a member of CACOR, have you talked to her about her journey to get a small hydro project going on the Rideau River? It was a story of some considerable anguish as well, that I think it took 20 years or more.
Right.
Because there was Parks Canada, Rideau River Conservation Authority, the various municipalities, let alone the utilities, and on it went. And they all had to have their say, and as well have their hand out, because they wanted a slice of the profits.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and this was just quite a nightmare, and I certainly tip my hat to her in terms of stick handling this one through, and finally having something come to fruition. So I'll turn this into a question. Have you at all spoken to Mary about her trip? Because I think you have a few things in common.
Yes, no, I'd love to meet Mary Art. I don't know her, and my interest in all this got rekindled again after me agreeing to do this presentation. So when I pulled everything up, and also this low head hydro technology, Dave Montmorency's company essentially folded, and he has retreated now. And I'm I'll be really sad if that particular technology disappears with him. And you know, how do we and he's been frustrated by the fact that orders are promised and he gets things going, but then halfway through some delays happen. So all of those things have created the problems on that side too. So I think if we can collectively even go and meet Dave and find a way to get some financing to invest, to get licensing for that technology, that'll be a great thing, because unfortunately a lot of that technology design is in his head, because it's an amazing system which works on a vacuum. So it sucks the water up, and then once it gets sucked up, and there's a real magic to the vortex that he has created, the angle that he has created. So I you know, this technology has tremendous potential for all over the world.
Yeah, I just a related question is the world of pumped hydro. Now, I recently in the last couple of years have looked at studies that are looking at the ideal locations where there just happens to be a lake on top of a mountain with a river below. And the closest one in Ontario, I chased it down, was somewhere off in Algonquin Park. And but there's literally hundreds of thousands of these ideal locations around the world, just waiting to be developed. Perhaps some of them are rather remote, and you're not going to get sufficient return on investment, and a whole bunch of design issues. But it is a technology that is very much related to what you've been championing.
Yes, in fact, I was in Reunion Islands. I took a World Bank mission there with people from a couple of countries. And Reunion Islands it's a French protectorate, as you know, in the Indian Ocean. It's an amazing showcase of renewable energy technologies, using from wind power and they have pumped hydro systems. So they operate the pumped hydro with solar and also using the hydro power itself. And then they have a 1 megawatt battery backup. They have about for their 3 megawatts, about 800 megawatts of solar, waste to energy. So it's an amazing showcase where Electricity to France, when you go to their operating room, you see the dials that operate between the best. So when a cloud cover comes, they got to shut down the solar, others can trip the system. So there are working models like that around the world, especially here, which we can use as examples. And they use coal power and bagasse depending on the sugar harvesting. So they use bagasse for much of the time, and when the bagasse is over from the harvesting season, they use coal for a short period. So a lot of this stuff is there already. Yes. Thank you, Art. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so hi, Lalith. I have
Phil, and Ted, you're on deck. So Phil, you go.
I have a comment to start with, Lalith, and then a question. My comment has to do with, in the last couple of slides, you referred to Chris Henderson.
Yes.
Are you referring to Chris Henderson here in Ottawa?
Yes. I have his book here. Let me just show it to you. You know the book called Aboriginal Power?
Yeah. Well, my comment is there was a spelling mistake.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay, and then my question has to do with fish migration on rivers, sort of run of the river and fish ladders. One of the best that I've ever seen is just outside of the city of Nanaimo, where they have both a run of the river hydro system and the ability to allow fish to migrate. And when I take a look at the run of the river system in Goleta, yes, it has a wonderful waterfall, but no ability for fish to get above the waterfall.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So this eco-siphon system is fish friendly. It's proven now, even through the study in Halliburton. They've come and they took them about 6 extra months to do that study. It's now proven beyond doubt that the fish go through, because there's another flowing, the water stream flows under the system too. So it's only a part of that water that gets sucked up, but fish don't get harmed through going through that, because it's a body of water that goes through.
So is your business also helping to correct some of the engineering faults that already exist?
Well, so this particular technology, the design of it is Dave Montmorency and his son Chris. They own it. So I'm not involved in the design part of it. I'm involved in the business development part of it. We were involved in trying to do get investors and get the licensors. So for us, it was trying to take it to Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka badly needed more power, rather than going the way of coal. They were planning to set up another coal plant and all of that too. So we were thinking that this system, because we have hundreds and thousands of kilometers of canal systems, we could just put them in every place where there's a drop virtually and generate energy without harming the water flow or anything else. So that's the part of the business I'm involved in, business development, not on the technology or the design.
What is the smallest drop in river that you can actually build something like that?
3 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil, you're done? Sorry. Ted, you're up next. And then John, you're on deck.
Hi, Lalith. Thank you very much. I have had the great pleasure of actually visiting and working in Sri Lanka. And in fact, there's a picture of it behind me in this particular. It's a lovely place, but it does, of course, as Lalith has told me and others many times, had its own issues. It strikes me that when we were there, we were trying to get business and government to work together on the planning and management of some of the environmental resources. And when you raised it now, it came immediately to my attention of, are we talking about a government that owns and runs everything, or is it private sector ownership and distribution of the power? Does it make a real difference regarding your ability to actually influence them with new ideas? Because I kind of feel the same thing here in Ontario, where it seems to make a large difference of who owns it and who profits.
Yes, so the entire power generation distribution system is owned by the government. It's called the Ceylon electricity board.
Right.
Now, over the last year or so, there's been a restructuring process where they're dividing generation and distribution, and then selling of electricity, transmission to different entities, which may then have opportunities for more private sector involvement in the process. However, when we look at developing countries, we cannot completely privatize these because there's a social aspect too. There's a pricing aspect that we need to think about, regulation of pricing. So this is the biggest challenge that developing countries have. And in terms of the private sector generating power, with the World Bank program, we really worked hard to change the legislation to enable the private sector to develop and sell power. And that is running robustly. And that whole process, because of World Bank's technical assistance, and we work closely with especially the human issues, because one of the things that happened with many of these programs is you don't look at the organizational relationship, emotional intelligence issues, leadership issues. We brought those things to bear, and we connected people. So we brought in the program, we brought the Sri Lankan Electricity Board, we brought the developers, everybody together to find common ground to work together. When you do that, then that creates a positive path, because then you also create personal relationships. It's not them and us anymore. We are in it together. So those are some of the other things that we need to seriously think about. In anything that we change, we need to look at the human aspect, the relationship aspect, finding common ground based on a common set of values. So all of those things become an important part of all this too.
Excellent. No arguments, Lalith. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Good question. John, you're up next, and then on deck is John Hollins. But first, John Legg. John Legg? No?
Here he comes.
Sorry about that. Well, congratulations for surviving all the adventures, Lalith, that you have gone through. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely. My question has to do with the natural prejudice, I would assume, that exists in favor of high head hydro. As a Quebecer, I grew up with the legend of James Bay, and I could sing you a few songs in French about, the workers being 4,000 miles away from their family or their girlfriends, and so on and so on. However, in Switzerland, right in the middle of the city, there was I would say, remarkably well-running low-head dam right in the middle of the city. But it would seem to me that in Canada, apart from the one you mentioned, was it Halliburton? I'm not sure, but
Halliburton.
It seems to me that the image that people would have would be, a high dam, long transmission lines, very high voltage, so as not to get into the all that loss of electricity on the way. What do you find culturally that the low head proponents in Canada have to work against when you have these legends of the fantastic Quebec ones and others? It's just that I grew up on the legendary Quebec ones. Is there a sort of a natural low head? We want hydro means a real dam, and of course it doesn't. So anyway, over to you.
Thank you, John. And for your comment about the patience, I must thank my wonderful life partner, Samantha, for having the patience to put up with me through all these adventures.
Amazing.
So yes, John, one of the biggest problems that we all face is that if this is such a good idea, why hasn't somebody else done it? And that's something that we've all faced all along with everything that I've done with these cutting edge technologies. so it's again, as a nation, are we going to recognize innovation? And I think it's starting to happen now, with other technologies too. So there's a reputation for Canada, which is like, if you want to raise $2 million, as a Canadian company, you go to a coffee shop in San Francisco and you can raise it over a coffee, whereas in Canada you'll never be able to do that. But I think it's starting to change with the high-tech industry too. So we need to honor these technologies. Now, when I talk to, I mean, I get invited to Carleton and Ottawa U to talk to sustainable university, sustainable energy students. And I asked them, do you know that there was this first ever solar factory that was installed in China was Canadian technology in 1980s? Why isn't that even recognized and respected? Why isn't somebody like Professor Ray Thomas respected for that? That first system in Cartwright that was installed is still working with the same solar panels that was made in Nepean. So these are things that we need to do. So when we don't recognize it, then that mindset is, yeah, we'll keep doing the same old thing over and over again. And the familiar is better, because investors also, and one of the biggest challenges that we faced with the low head hydro was the fact that it was unusual. So the investors would say, how do you know this is going to work? So those are all kinds of issues that we need to really be able to break through. And the government needs to be involved in that process and to recognize these new innovations and support them. Bankers need to, like, BDC needs to be involved. So the old traditional banking, development banking system has changed now the world over, because private sector has taken over. So they're now only profit oriented. All that has to change to really look at how do we develop these technologies, and especially on the energy side, which is now being ignored because there's such a focus on the high-tech area too. So these are some of the things that I would say we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see what you're driving at. Yes. Thank you, Levy.
Thank you.
Okay, John Hollins, you're up next, and then Claude, you're on deck.
Lalith, I've had the pleasure of occasional conversations with you pre-COVID, but I knew you were a dynamo, but I didn't realize that you're a gigawatt dynamo, not a kilowatt dynamo. So thank you very much. You mentioned a conference in 1988.
Yes.
That's the same year that Canada hosted a special conference in Toronto on the changing atmosphere, which in my view put global heating on the international environmental agenda. Interesting coincidence, not a coincidence, perhaps we should have expected. Now, since you began in this business and you showed us some really quite ancient solar cells,
Yes.
the advances in solar photovoltaics in particular have been simply spectacular, driven by research, technological development, and people marketing. Now, you have a wealth of experience as a marketer. And I want to ask, based on that, there are some of us in CACOR who think we should be marketing ideas and proposals for policy, also known as advocacy. Do you think CACOR has the capacity to do that? And if you do, what would your advice be in how to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John. Good question. And that's exactly what we did by creating the Energy Forum in Sri Lanka, and brought in people from all kinds of areas, including we invited bankers, we invited others to sit on the board. So we became an advocacy organization to promote these technologies at a policy level too. We also gave them advice on bringing on coal projects without thinking about the outcomes of all of that too. So that's the kind of organization that I think CACOR can become. At the same time, then CACOR also has to have some solid solid evidence as to why we are promoting what we are promoting. So the Energy Forum, we got funding from various agencies around the world to do pilot projects, for instance, with biomass and biogas. With the microhydro was a very successful program. And then we also provided technical assistance to various agencies coming from to do research into not only just energy, but looking at lifestyle, poverty, income generation projects. So all of those things so there was a substance behind what we were saying, and that gave us a lot more power to do what we were doing. Even when the World Bank came and the Asian Development Bank came, that they wouldn't ride roughshod over us, because there are projects. I mean, I was World Bank got me to go to Uganda to assess a project in a World Bank program in Uganda, and one of the projects, beautifully designed project at the grassroots, a water pumping, water supply scheme, where the village chief headed the cooperative, and then they partnered with the water supply company and all of that. But they had over-engineered the system with grown force pumps. When I went, the pump wasn't working. And I could switch it on, I could hear the click go back. So when they said, look, all this needed was a ball, a floating ball, and a normal pump that we could prepare here, nobody in the country knew how to repair these electronics. It had created dissent and a problem in the village, where they were blaming the chief, and the conflict in the village. So these are things that we need to think about. So we were able to advocate for doing programs like that, even if these money came with vested interest. We said, no, you're going to have to make it now locally adaptable for the local culture and the local people and the way it should be done here. So how can we think of that kind of a process for CACOR to play in a holistic way, not focused on one thing? I know we have a climate change focus right now, because I think we have enough of firepower here within the organization and the credibility to do a lot of things. But the other thing is to Energy Forum, even though we volunteered our time, because as a board, we paid a group of people good money to run the organization. So at first, when HIVOS, a Dutch organization, funded the Energy Forum, they were used to paying essentially peanuts to their staff, NGO staff. We argued with HIVOS and said, look, we have to hire engineers at the going rate. And we brought on people who were talented people who were earning a living, and that's how we created the organization. And we also made sure that we were able to sustain the organization by saving money from projects to make sure that if we didn't get any money from outside, how do we survive? So we always had a buffer for 1 year. So those are the kinds of things that we need to create as an organization if we're going to do this seriously. And then, of course, the other thing is we have to then sign up as a lobby group, right? There are some laws and regulations around that too with the Canadian government. So we need to think about that. And I think there's a potential for that if that's the direction CACOR wants.
You made an important point for me. As a lobbyist, as an advocacy organization, you have to be prepared to stand up for yourself, which is one of the critical things that I think you did. So CACOR has to examine, as it's developing its new strategy, are we ready to fight for what we believe in and go get the money to make it happen?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, John. Yes.
Thanks, John. That's great. Claude, you're up, and then Gabriella, you're on deck.
Okay, your response to the last two questions actually was a nice segue, because my related questions, there's two of them that I put in chat with a link for reference, has to do, first of all, with the scale of heat pumps, and whether or not, my question is basically, have you seen heat pumps used in smaller houses? And my research suggests that the smallest heat pump commercially available today is about 260 watts, which really surprised me it would go down that low. The related question is the structure, and I'm actually going back to your very early part of your career, where the investor actually is the homeowner that's taking the advantage of the technology. And that has my interest. And whether or not groups of people could get together and together buy as a co-op. Co-ops have been used in agricultural areas in the United States, and I think in Canada for a couple of centuries, perhaps, where some equipment just is beyond the means of one person, but it's very much within the means of even a poor community. So can you talk on those issues?
Well, as a technology, I must confess, I don't know too much on heat pumps, except for I have close friends who, in fact, a friend who just bought a house in Aylmer has put a heat pump now, and I'm very keen to find out how that's gonna how that has performed over the winter. I have other friends again near Peterborough who has installed a system too. So I'm really looking forward to learning more. But I've also heard mixed reviews on heat pumps ability, because I know another person that I know who said that they invested in the heat pump, but it has to be supplemented with other heating systems because it's not generating enough heat as they expected. So there are some unknowns there, I presume, but I'm looking forward to talking to my friend. His name is actually, he's an interesting person. You might be he might even invite us for a look around, because his name is Lutz Tischendorf. He's working with a company called Blue Wave AI, which does electronic control systems to manage energy utilities, optimization of various technologies coming in using artificial intelligence. So he's also into creating systems for electric cars around that too. So it might be, and I did invite him for this, and he was not available, but might be an opportunity to go and talk to him if there's a specific interest to Claude. I can make that introduction too. So,
how about the part of the co-ops? Are they used in Sri Lanka or Africa where you have experience?
Absolutely.
South America?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest I guess the focus is on funerals, on death in countries like Sri Lanka. So every village has what's called a funeral benefit cooperative, where everybody diligently contributes to have a dignified funeral. So that cooperative has existed in rural Sri Lanka for years, for hundreds of years. And that base has been expanded to the microhydro cooperative, the microfinance cooperatives. So they're fairly well governed as a result of this life event that people are anticipating. So there's very little skullduggery in those cooperatives as a result of the purpose of it. And I've seen a similar in Uganda too. They said that this water project was based on a death benefit society that they have at the grassroots level. So it's definitely something that can be worked. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Claude. Thank you for your question. Gabriella, you're up.
Thanks. Hi, Lalith. Fascinating journey indeed. One that we actually spoke about because at some point we crossed paths through technology, not so much personally though, right? Yes. In the 80s, fascinating for us to actually share that history. And I agree with you, that kind of history should be recognized. Like what the value that Dr. Thomas and the rest of the teams have brought to the industry. But that left aside, we have actually, I'm just going to touch on the other aspect of what you have been doing, and that's the business ethics. You gave several examples of cooperation and so on. You've been involved with the Cambridge University courses?
Bath University. Yes.
Oh, Bath University, yes. Sorry. Yes. Okay, I'm just wondering if you can give us a little bit of an example of how do industries respond to such practices these days? Like, how do you find the environment in these days?
Thank you. Good question, Gabriela. So CSR evolved as a result of the reputational issues many companies were facing, and customers as well as investors and boards were having issues with that. So CSR, essentially corporate social responsibility, is a voluntary effort where it's done for reputational purposes. It's done to show that you're a good citizen. So most corporations, as we know, the limited liability license gives them the license only to make profit, nothing else. So the responsibility part is something that you do on your own. And CSR then became tainted by the whole greenwashing of many of these corporations who were making big claims, but they were not really walking the talk. So it has come to a stage now, especially because of the environmental issues and all that too, where many governments are now putting legislation to the next level from CSR, which is ESG, environmental sustainability and governance. And that is having a lot of pushback, because now many of these companies are bound to report on the environmental, the footprint, and if it's a large company, and then the social footprint. Not only the social footprint, then within the social comes the diversity, equity and inclusion part of it too. So there's a huge pushback from the corporations, especially down in the US too, because it is now impinging on the freedom a corporate will have by having to now put time and effort into these areas. I think we need to look at these as practical approaches, because if you're really authentic and honest about managing your ESG, now there's proof that it is also good for business. If you're an inclusive organization which is creating safe spaces, psychological spaces for your team members as well as stakeholders, then you're going to create a good company, good organization that's going to thrive and flourish. So there are business reasons as to why businesses should follow these processes. So I'm still a bit ambivalent about forcing companies to do this, but if that's what it takes, then I'm okay with it. But in a way where we have to also give a little bit of space for these organizations to come up with various processes that's going to be productive for that organization to move forward, rather than impeding the business processes too, because that's a fine balance between profit making and loss making. Because at the end of the day, if you don't make a profit, and I've owned many businesses, that's the end of that. We're not going to be able to do a lot of things that we have to do. I lost all my hair at the end of the month to pay 60 people's salaries, because that was one of the biggest challenges, stresses that we had as owners of the business, because there were ups and downs. We had to deal with an insurgency. We worked through a war. There were all kinds of things that were happening in Sri Lanka while we ran this business. And it could just take something like this for us not to be able to run the business, or cash checks or whatever it is. So I think we have to find that fine balance. And I think that is starting to happen. And it's about then keeping that conversation alive. And I must say, I'm involved in some of this work right now with federal government and organizations and corporates on diversity, inclusion, as well as the ESG side of things. And I'm involved in a organization called Oxygen. It's a carbon trading platform out of Switzerland, which works in conjunction with the sustainable development goals of companies, where it's a transparent platform, whereas many of these platforms are not transparent. They go to developing countries and they tell them,
that's it.
Look, we'll give you $10 million, but they are making $40 million. They're only offering the local company $10 million. So Oxygen, for instance, tells you right away through satellite imagery and science-based processes that land is worth so much money. And that's it's coming up as a trading platform, like Kijiji, for instance. So you put up a plot of land in Tanzania, and an oil company or somebody else will bid on that. And then they can really see also through a QR code what that money is actually going to, based on SDG. So it doesn't go into people's pockets. It has to get involved in projects using SDG goals, the 17 goals. So income generation, it could be healthcare, it could be education, it could be agriculture. A whole bunch of things have to come into play here. So I think that's a good system that's evolving now. And then the corporations are also then have an opportunity to balance some of their accounting along these lines, as they also then lower their footprint on their own too through the ESG processes.
Thanks very much, Lalith. I mean, there is a lot to talk about these business ethics for sure, and I know that you're giving great lots of courses as well, and you're influencing a lot of people, and also through our values seminars or sessions that we have. Your contributions have been great. Thanks very much, Lalith.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Yeah, no kidding. I think this is a fantastic presentation, Lalith. And at this point, I'll head over to Ted to thank you for today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's been a pleasure. It's been a real pleasure to bring back these memories and pull off those old files and dust them off and to work on this. So it's been really nice to rekindle all that and to look at the future with that too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this is super again. I mean, this is quite frankly, every time we get you on, it makes us want to go to neat places where you've been doing. Just to mention one thing before I go on to the normal end, there was a presentation on essentially the rejigging of finance, a presentation within the Club of Rome about a month ago. And what came up was the sort of kickback that's happening from many firms where their own shareholders are demanding that they stop spending money on useless things like saving the planet and keeping staff and things like that. So could I just get you to respond briefly to that? Is that general, or can we be more optimistic?
Well, I think especially in the United States and North America, where there's a culture is about profit making, and it is very difficult to change that foundational culture that the nation was founded on. And this is the most sort of the nation that's having the highest footprint. So I think there's a huge tension between the extreme groups on one side, and then there's extreme groups on the other side too. So I trust that the new generation will, in the next 10 years or so, will find that common ground and agree that corporations are, I mean, if you look at also, it's the lobby groups and the corporations that run the politics right now. So that, as a license to operate, provides a corporation the ability to lobby, not only lobby, but campaign contributions. And who knows how else money goes into the pockets of the politicians through the corporations. And we know that it happens. And we can see that very clearly from the kind of decisions that the legislatures are making around the world, especially in the democratic world right now. So I think I have a feeling that the younger generation have a different attitude towards all this, has a better balance, because I work with a lot of younger people, school and university students. So their attitude is much less profit oriented, but more oriented towards sustainability and governance and discipline and all that too. So hopefully, Ted, that will change.
Super, Lalith. Every time we need optimism, we have to invite you on. It's a lot better than some of the alternatives. Anyway, I'd like to thank you again on behalf of the Canadian Association of the Club of Rome. We are heading towards our 200th presentation in a couple of months. We are definitely making a difference. We have other Club of Rome associations nationally watching us. We are now being featured once in a while on the International Club of Rome, and people like you and our other members are making a positive difference. So that's really good. So thank you again for being a part of this movement that we seem to be fostering one way or another. So thank you very much. And I will do the commercial again for any of you who are not members. Please join. If you know of a student who would like to join us and likes this kind of stuff, we have very, very low rates. We're going to try and entice people to join us and to raise good questions. And finally, to ask you if you are going to share it on the YouTube version, which goes, please subscribe on the YouTube button when you're on. It makes us a little more visible when you do that. And I will now again say, join us, watch the ones if you miss any, and enjoy talking to each other. We're going to turn the thing off now, stop recording so we can talk without anybody listening that we don't want listening.